So we're all called to create ripples, but let's be honest, there are some people who are difficult and that makes it harder for us to experience heaven together. So last week, Pastor Stan started off this sermon series about how we could deal with difficult people. He taught us about the process in which we have to go through so that we can see the people around us with the same eyes that God sees them. Well, today, Pastor Stan's going to summarize for us what we learned last week and then walk Pastor Laurie through that process.
Welcome. I'd like to begin this time by reading a quote from Mother Teresa. And she says, "I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the water to create many ripples." What we want to do today is provide an example of a process of how to create healthy ripples with difficult people. And we're going to have the privilege of hearing from Pastor Laurie about handling a difficult person in her life in a healthy way. So we're going to walk through this process, and let me just explain the process a little bit. The process begins with identifying the difficult person and then describing what is negative and what is positive about the memories you have or the interactions you've had with the person. Then to take the posture of really engaging and discovering how those negative feelings are being influenced or shaped into beliefs about the person, and looking at where those beliefs are coming from, and then looking at how that belief affects your behavior toward the individual and how that compares to how you would desire to behave or interact with the individual. So from these observations or discoveries, we then move to a exploration, which involves how we can perhaps have these memories reframed so that our beliefs can be adjusted, or maybe looking into the idea or the application of empathy and forgiveness, and how that might be God's invitation to be able to receive the gift of forgiveness and empathy, and in so doing being able to celebrate with Jesus. And then maybe looking at grief and how that we can engage in grief with Jesus and others, and so that we can know that we are not alone in this. And so the process basically is designed to identify our true self, or the person God created us to be, that He desires for us to be blessing the world around us and to show His glory. The true self brings healthy ripples. So let's begin our exploration with Pastor Laurie. So Pastor Laurie, who would you like us to hear about and share in your journey with?
Okay, my difficult person is Chris, and I changed her name because she doesn't know she's my difficult person. But we are very close friends. I've known Chris for most of my life, and just have a lot of great memories of us growing up, talking, playing games, playing sports, shopping. It's really hard for me to even say that she's a difficult person in my life because I love her so much. But what makes our relationship difficult is that she's an addict and I'm an enabler. And so a lot of my memories really have to do with her lying and maybe denying and not taking responsibility. And that's really hard for me because, there are times when maybe we would arrange getting together and we haven't had to do that in a couple years, but so COVID has been kind of relief in this and has helped me to take a step back and think about our relationship. But there would be, if we planned to get together, there would be a good chance that she would cancel or she wouldn't show up at all. She might show up sober, but then I would always be wondering, like, did she drink? Is she drinking? What's going on? What condition is she in? And there was one time specifically where we did get together and I don't know how she got to my house, but she could barely walk and talk and keep her eyes open. And so I think it's having those experiences that really create a lot of anxiety and fear and anger for me. And it makes our relationship difficult.
So how do these memories influence you?
So I'm disappointed in myself because I cope by ignoring her addiction. Like we've had conversations about her using, and I live within these two extremes. Like I either don't want to talk about it at all and not think about the bad and only like ignore the bad, or I want to fix her and I care. I don't know how to not care about her recovery more than she cares about her recovery. And I feel stuck because I'm waiting for her to go into recovery.
So what are some ways that you see reframing, empathy and forgiveness, and grieving helping you to move forward?
That's good. Okay, so reframing my memories. The story I want to tell myself is, and it's based in reality, is that the Chris that I know is not the Chris that I grew up with. That the Chris that I know now is really her addiction. And also, my strong desire for her to get better and to want to fix her, it really is the 8-year-old Laurie that still lives within me that wants her dad to stop drinking so that her family will be happier and safer. As far as empathy goes, the conversations that Chris and I have had about her addiction, I know that it's hard. I know that it's so hard for her to ask for help. And I get that. It's hard for me to ask for help. She's so proud and she so wants to do this on her own. And I get that. I am so like that too. I understand it. And also, she is weighed down by guilt and shame. And she has this harsh critic that is relentless in her condemnation of herself. And so my heart just goes out to her in that way. As far as forgiveness, let's see, that's a hard one. And forgiveness is a process. So remember, it's a process. I don't think I've ever, it's a process. Okay. So I think for me, the hardest thing is to name the harm and to be as specific as I can be, and not necessarily to talk about that with Chris, but more like with my therapist and with my life group, with my friends and to with God, and to journal and process. Okay, what happened? How do I feel about that? And what harm did that do to me and our relationship? And I think, that saying, she's doing her best is good. And I think that's part of the empathy side, but to be as specific as possible, like naming that time when we were going to go out to dinner and she showed up, like barely able to keep her eyes open, that needs to be named, because that needs to be forgiven. And I think the second part of forgiveness is letting go. And what motivates me to forgive, is my knowing and experiencing God's warm embrace and welcoming home, as one who is probably someone else's difficult person, and as one who harms people every day of her life. Know the way of evil. I know what it's like to hold on to that anger, to, as one who grew up in a home of alcoholic and going through their teen years and experiencing all the hormones and trying to figure out who I am, and to not have agency and to not have power, I would think such evil thoughts, and I wanted so much harm. I wanted my dad to hurt as much as I had been hurt. And so I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to want to condemn someone, to want to harm someone as I have been harmed. And that led me down a path of death and destruction, because as I lived out that anger and that pain, I really lost my humanity in a sense, right? I was stuck emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, and I wanted to numb myself from the pain, and in that process I numbed myself from the joy, and I really was just living life as a zombie, with no life and no love and no freedom and joy and peace. And so that's when I knew, when I came back to the Lord, that's when I knew what forgiveness felt like. And I want to put that out. I want those ripples, the ripples of love, to go out and be part of that path, as opposed to the path of evil and harm and destruction. I think for me, the third one was grieving, and that's probably the hardest for me, because it's so hard for me to identify and feel sadness, because it's very difficult for me. But I am sad about the fact that I can't trust her. I'm sad that we don't have the same experiences that we had before. And not that they had to be exactly the same, but we still go to concerts together. We can still hang out. We can still shop and talk. And we don't have that currently. And I think that makes me really sad. And I grieve that.
So how can others journey with you in this process and this plan of action?
How can others journey with me? For me, there is no formula, right? And this process, how I'm going to answer today is going to be different from, if you ask me this question next month or next year, right? Because it is a process, and we're changing and we're growing and we're understanding more. And so for me, for today, as I try to answer your question, it's walking with me as one who struggles with forgiveness. It's validating my feelings of frustration and anger and fear. It's accepting me. It's being with me in my sadness. It's going to be my therapist, helping me create boundaries and coming up with consequences. And then it's going to be all hands on deck when I have that conversation with Chris, to be able to express my boundaries and to be able to follow through with those consequences, because there is so much fear of losing the friendship, and telling me I'm going to need people around me to tell me, no, these consequences and these boundaries are good and they are loving and you can do it. And even though it's hard, you can do it. And I think it is our tendency to want to hide from sin, to want to deny it, and to seek refuge in the darkness. But it's in the darkness that we deny, that we experience shame and guilt, that we can even blame others and become self-righteous. But Jesus is the light, and he is the light of the world, and he invites us to bring that darkness that we want to hide out into the light. And I think it's 1 Peter 2:9 that says, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, and that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. So this process, it helps us to create ripples of health and of love. And that is how we are going to experience heaven together.